I had never heard that Mr. Hitchcock drew everything and then shot it. And you have to remember that I was from the 70s, where at that particular point in the history of film, people were throwing up a lot in films. They were sweating and drooling and improvising and walking off camera, and if things were blurry, that was okay, and they were using a lot of zooms. So his style was very different from what I was used to.
George, are you all right?
I think so. How about you?
I'm okay.
Hitchcock had long been known to be one of the early directors to storyboard and do conceptual designs. And of course, with the conceptual designs, that came from the production designer, Henry Bumstead.
Should go this way or this way. Doesn't matter, really.
But Hitchcock personally would do some of the storyboards, and then he commissioned Tommy Wright to do a number of the storyboards for him, and he would meet with Tommy and tell him exactly how he saw it. He'd look at those drawings and make adjustments.
To pre-edit a scene and then shoot it the way you want to edit it and then edit it is insane, because it's not possible. You'll never get a good scene that way. But Hitchcock got a great scene every time. What's exceptional really isn't that he was so adamant and such a perfectionist. What's amazing is that it worked. Usually you have in your mind a notion of how this scene is going to look, how it's going to run, how it's going to feel, and then you put it there like you imagine. It doesn't work. So you have to re-edit, and then you have to re-edit that, then you have to re-edit that. But what he did was almost supernatural when you think about it. He pre-thought it so thoroughly and with such an accurate imagination that when you cut it, it worked just the way he thought it would every time, every scene, every movie.
Hitchcock used to tell me and show me films and explain his theory in chases. And one of those theories is, if you're in a vehicle or in a train with your actors and the camera is inside, you shoot everything inside that train. Most directors would shoot the scene and then take their camera out into the field and show the train in a long shot going from left to right. But once you're in the car, you must stay in the car.
He said, Bruce, he says, you know what, make this scene work? And I didn't know. So he had to explain to me. He says, well, what I do is I do close-ups of you and Barbara, and I do the car's point of view of the road. And I never show you the car. I show you the car when the oil's coming out of the brake thing, and then I let the car go. And I just cut to you and the car's point of view of the road. That way, the audience thinks they're you and are going through the trip. And he does that on all his movies. I mean, that's the way to keep suspense. Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that's why it worked in a movie. Then at the end, we have the car crash. And the first thing you see is the car is upside down, and here's Barbara's head peeking out of the top. And then she's going to try to get out of the car. She starts climbing out, and her foot is on my face because the car's upside down like that. Well, that's just, you know, Hitchcock said women always walk on men. They walk all over them, so why not, you know. And then I come underneath the car with my head out that way, and he said, now, Bruce, you be a worm and she'll be a bird. Well, that's inventive.
Bestowed upon your dear mother and father all the care, all the attention, patience, and comfort that they needed in the sunset of their lives. And those of us who are left behind to grieve for you, Joseph.
Hitch always had 2 or 3 things he was very adamant about. In Family Pod, he was very adamant about that high shot in the cemetery. You really followed what he had in mind on those and gave him what he wanted, you know.
One of the major scenes of the picture was the cemetery scene, which we shot in Sierra Madre, California. And of course, all of the tombstones that you read on screen, you have to supply. In those days, and probably today, you're not to reveal somebody's name, because somebody could call up and say, you've shown my wife's tombstone with her name on it, and I'm upset about it. Actually, that did happen. Later on, somebody called up, and I was brought in. I had to look at the film, and I said, that may be somebody's name, but we provided that tombstone. It's not their tombstone. So by coincidence, there was somebody else buried in a California cemetery with that name. But in providing those cemeteries, Hitchcock had an idea. And when he had a press junket arrive at the cemetery, many of the tombstones had those people's names on it.
Hitchcock, I enjoyed the film very much, but I noticed one scene that seemed all by itself, separated from the rest of the film. And that was the second scene in the cemetery, when the camera came away and you saw them like working their way through a maze. And it seemed rather a romantic kind of image that you had created. Is there any particular reason for it?
No, it had a practical value. It showed a kind of a chase, and I was possibly influenced by the paintings of Mondrian, which are a series of lines, straight lines converging into various squares and turns. And I felt it was just a fresh way of doing a small chase. Instead of just cutting from one figure to another or cutting to the feet, it was a more spectacular way. But nevertheless, its purpose was to show that our hero was getting nearer and nearer to his goal, which was the woman.
I also thought what was rather witty about that scene was the fact that he never left the path that he was on. He could have cut cross lots, as it were, and he did not. The notion of staying on the path, I thought, was kind of humorous.
Yes, well, it was. It was humorous to the extent that you do try and preserve in a cemetery some decorum.
Exactly so.